Welcome to the lecture video 3, Unit 1, Management and Organizational Behavior. In this video, I'm going to explain you about Hawthorne experiments. What are the contributions of Henry Fayol, F.W. Taylor, and Peter Drucker? Let me explain you about the 4 phases of Hawthorne experiment. In the beginning of 20th century, companies were using scientific approaches to improve worker productivity. And all began to change in 1924 with the start of Hawthorne Studies, a 9-year research program at Western Electric Companies. The program, of which Elton Mayo and Fritz Roethlisberger played a major role, concluded that an organization's undocumented social system was a powerful motivator of employee behavior. The Hawthorne studies led to the development of the human relations movement in business management. The experiment was about measuring the impact of different working conditions by the company itself, such as levels of lighting, payment systems, and hours of work on the output of the employees. The researchers concluded that variations in output were not caused by changing physical conditions or material rewards only, but partly by the experiments themselves. So the special treatment required by experimental participation convinced workers that management had a particular interest in them, and this raised morale and led to increased productivity. The Hawthorne effect is widely used to refer to the behavior modifying effects of being the subject of social investigation. Due to these experiments, the researchers have concluded that the supervisory style greatly affected worker productivity. And the results were, of course, a major blow to the position of scientific management, which held that employees were motivated by individual economic interest. So these were the studies of Hawthorne drew attention to the social needs as an additional source of motivation. And economic incentives were now viewed as one of the factors, but not the sole factor to which employees responded. The 4 phases of this experiment are illumination studies, relay assembly test room experiment, bank wiring test, and the interview process. The term Hawthorne is used within several behavioral management theories, and actually it is derived from the Western Electric Company's large factory complex named Hawthorne Works. Starting in 1905 and operating until 1983, Hawthorne Works had 45,000 employees, and it produced a variety of consumer products including telephone equipment, refrigerators, and electric fans. And Hawthorne Works was very well known for its enormous output of telephone equipment, and most importantly for its industrial experiences and studies carried out at its place. So between 1924 and 32, a series of experiments were carried out on the employees at the facility. And the original purpose of the study was to see the effect of lighting on workers' productivity. Isn't it amazing? So let us see in each of these experiments. As you can see, there are 4 experiments. What all is being done by the employees. So coming to the very first one, illumination studies. In the early 1920s, Chicago's Western Electric Hawthorne Works employed 12,000 workers. The plant was a primary manufacturer of telephones, and in 1924 the company provided a site to cooperate with the National Research Council on a series of test room studies to determine the relationship between illumination and worker efficiency. The illumination study's main purpose was to just see the effect of light, that is illumination, on the workers' efficiency, or you can say the productivity. So the basic idea was to vary and record levels of illumination in a test room with the expectation that as lighting was increased, productivity would increase too. In another test room, illumination was decreased with the correlating expectation that efficiency would decrease. The electric power industry provided an additional impetus for these tests, hoping to encourage industries to use artificial lighting in place of natural light. So the Illuminating Engineering Society's committee on this research also supported the test and cooperated with the National Research Council. In this test, workers were notified of the test in order to attempt to control interference from human factors. When production increased in each test period, researchers looked to other factors such as increased supervision and a sense of competition that developed between the test and control groups. But the one conclusion the impressive team of industrial specialists and academics discovered was the lack of a consistent correlation between the lighting levels and product output. No further tests were planned originally, but researchers were surprised at the unanticipated results. So the National Research Council researchers concluded that a variety of factors must affect industrial output other than just the lighting effect, because they continue to produce 7 million relays annually. So this was about the illumination studies that had happened. Next experiment that had happened in the Hawthorne experiments were relay assembly test room experiment. So in order to observe the impact of these other factors, a second set of tests were begun before the completion of the illumination studies on April 25th, 1987. So the relay assembly tests were designed to evaluate the effect rest periods and hours of work would have on efficiency. Okay, so the main aim of conducting this test was to evaluate the effect of rest periods and hours of work on the efficiency of the employees. So researchers hope to answer a series of questions concerning why output declined in the afternoon. Did the operators tired out? Did they need brief rest periods? What was the impact of changes in equipment? What were the effects of a shorter workday? What role did workers' attitudes play? So Hawthorne engineers led by George Pennock were the primary researchers for the relay assembly test, and they were originally intended to take place for only a few months. So in this experiment, 6 women operators volunteered for the study and 2 more joined the test group in January 1928. And they were administered physical examinations before the study began, and then every 6 weeks in order to evaluate the effects of changes in working conditions on their health. The women were isolated in a separate room to assure accuracy in the measuring output and quality, as temperature, humidity, and other factors were adjusted. And the test subjects constituted a piecework payment group, and efforts were made to maintain steady work patterns. The Hawthorne researchers attempted to gain the women's confidence and to build a sense of pride in their participation. So a male observer was introduced into the test room to keep accurate records, maintain cordial working conditions, and provide some degree of supervision. The women were employed in assembling relays on electromagnetic switches used in switching telephone calls automatically. And the women assembled the more than 35 parts of the relay by hand. The relays were then carefully inspected, and the entire process was highly labor intensive, and the speed of assembly had an obvious effect on productivity. So initially the women were monitored for productivity, and then they were isolated in a test room. Finally, the workers began to participate in a group payment rate where extra pay for increased productivity was shared by the group. The other relay assemblers did not share in any bonus pay, but the researchers concluded that this added incentive was necessary for full cooperation.